Welcome back to the Dershow. I'm broadcasting again from Israel, from Tel Aviv. Tomorrow I go to Jerusalem. Israel is really one of the most fascinating countries on the face of the earth. Whatever you may think of particular government, particular leaders, it's an incredibly fascinating place. The high technology here is beyond belief. And I've met with some of the leaders of high technology and some of the military leaders, and I'm really learning an enormous amount. Obviously, I can't learn everything. There are a lot of secrets, but even what I'm learning just makes this into an amazing place. I think Israel, in 75 years of its existence, has provided more useful things to humanity than any country in its first 75 years. I'm not comparing it, obviously, to the United States, but to countries in their first 75 years. So here I am really enjoying myself and meeting lots of friends and lots of leaders. But let's go back to the United States. So I read this morning's Times, and the headline was Oath Keepers Leader Convicted of Sedition in Landmark January 6th case. So, as a constitutional scholar and a historian of the early days of the American experience, when you hear the word sedition, the first thing you think about is the notorious Alien and Sedition Acts. Those were the acts enacted during the Adams administration, which punished people, threw them in jail for exercising their free speech. It was enacted less than 10 years after the First Amendment was enacted. It was supported by George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and John Adams. It was opposed by Thomas Jefferson. It was opposed by Madison. And when Jefferson became president, it was ultimately abolished. But the sedition laws really just punished people who had different views on our relationships with France. And then the sedition laws were used subsequently to oppose people and put people in jail who opposed the First World War, and used during the Civil War and after the Civil War. Does it really fit into current events today? Look, I surely don't like what the Oath Keepers stand for. And as you know, I didn't approve of President Trump's speech on January 6th or his denial of the election results, which I think were fair and accurate, not perfect, but Biden was legitimately elected president. But I support the constitutional rights of people who disagree with me. And, if people had just marched to the Capitol the way President Trump said they should, patriotically and peacefully, and protested and said, no, he's not the legitimate president, Biden. The legitimate president is Trump. I would have supported their rights. Look, I opposed the election of 2000. I went to court on behalf of voters who were denied the right to elect Gore president. Al Gore was, I think, legitimately elected a president of the United States. I think that the butterfly ballots in Palm Beach County were illegal, and people, at least 1,000 people, voted erroneously because of the butterfly ballot. That would have changed Florida. That would have changed the election. I wrote a book about it called Supreme Injustice. I didn't go into the Capitol. I didn't do anything violent, but I protested the outcome of an election. I didn't think it was fair. I didn't think what the Supreme Court did was fair. And I exercised my constitutional rights. I don't agree with the people who think the election was stolen. I don't agree with Stop the Steal, but I defend their rights. I believe in Voltaire. I disagree with what you're saying, but I defend to the death your right to say it. So I get very worried when I see convictions for sedition. Mostly the crime of sedition has been used against protesters from the left. It has been used against anarchists. It's been used against communists. It's been used against socialists. It's been used against anti-war activists. It's been used even in some states against labor union leaders. A number of states over the years, in the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century, declared martial law to protest against protesters from the labor union. and people were locked up for sedition. There were state sedition laws. The Supreme Court ultimately ruled that states can't have treason laws, that's an issue that's left to the national Congress. But sedition has a terrible legacy and history in the United States. And I have to tell you, I don't believe that what the folks did on January 6th constituted sedition or treason or anything of that nature. Don't think it was an attempt to overthrow the government by force or violence. It was a protest that got out of hand. It was a terrible, terrible protest. And people who tried to use force to influence Vice President Pence not to count the ballots or to not declare that Biden was the president were wrong. That's why I'm a Democrat, not a Republican. That's why I'm a person of the center, not a person of the right. But I'm going to continue to defend the rights of people I disagree with. And what I disagree with most fundamentally is attempts to weaponize the criminal justice system against people you disagree with. Again, let's start out with the assumption you might disagree with me, but I believe that the events of January 6th were horrible, terrible, awful. I am representing one of the people who went into the Capitol because I believe in defending people I disagree with. But I disagree with attempts to overturn the election. I disagree with the substance, the content of the protests against the election. I also obviously disagree with any attempt to try to stop the vice president. There's no basis in law for that. I mean, I understand people believe there is a basis in law for it, and there are provisions in Article 2 of the Constitution that you can read that way. I just think that's the wrong reading of the Constitution. But that doesn't mean that this is sedition. This is a protest that got out of hand. And I just think weaponizing the criminal justice system and using it in this way against protesters is something that civil libertarians, the American Civil Liberties Union, leftists would be railing against if the shoe were on the other foot. If it were being used against left-wing agitators. For example, after the George Floyd killing, we know there were attempts by some people in Black Lives Matter and other such organizations to take over the police stations, to take over parts of towns and areas. I wouldn't, and I don't agree with that. They burn cars. Recently, two lawyers, graduates of Fordham and NYU Law School, threw Molotov cocktails into police cars and gave out Molotov cocktails to other people to throw at who knows where or who knows who. They could have been killed. Were they guilty of sedition? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You have to have one rule and one law for everybody. You can't have one rule that says if the right wing does it, it's sedition. If the left wing does it, it's a protest. No, you have to look at the facts. You have to look at the law. You have to look at everything blindfolded. As I've said so many times on my podcast, one of my favorite quotes from the Bible, my own Bar Mitzvah Sedra portion in the book of Deuteronomy, it says to the judges, Lo takir panim, do not recognize faces. Wear that blindfold. Don't peek under the blindfold. You can't have different rules for the right and the left. You can't have different rules for white and black people. You can't have different rules for men and women. You can't have different rules based on who a person is. The Bible also says you cannot treat the poor and the rich differently. Equality, equal justice. Not only must justice be equal, it must be seen to be equal. And it can't be used by one part of the political spectrum to go after the other part for two reasons. First of all, it's wrong and it's immoral. Second of all, it sets a precedent. Today, it's used against the right. Tomorrow, it's going to be used against the left. Look, I grew up at a time of McCarthyism, where all these deviations of the law were used against the left by the right. And in those days, I was defending people on the left. Today, I tend to be defending people on the right more, not because I've moved to the right. I haven't shifted one bit. I'm a boringly consistent person. It's just that today, the victims of government oppression, the victims of the double standard, tend to be people on the right, people I disagree with, people I fundamentally oppose, people I wouldn't vote for. people who are not part of my political or social circle. I mean, I am friends with some conservatives, but not extremists on the hard right. But I defend their right. I even defend the right of anti-Semites. Look, Kanye West has a right under the Constitution to say the stupid, bigoted, dumb, outrageous things that he said about DEFCON 3 for the Jews. He has the right to say it. I'll defend his right to say it, just as I defended the rights of Nazis to march through Skokie. That other idiot, Fuentes, he has the right to deny the Holocaust. He's an idiot, but people have the right to say the earth is flat. I think Kanye West once said that the earth is flat. And I don't deny people the right to say it. I believe in the marketplace of ideas, and I think those ideas should fall in the marketplace, and the stalls should not be frequented by people. Turn off the TV, turn off the computer. Don't listen to them, oppose them, write op-eds on the other side. Do all of that. Just don't ban them, don't suppress them, and don't prosecute them for sedition. That's an overuse and a misuse of a term that had a very particular meaning, particularly during the run-up to the Civil War and in the period after the Civil War, where it was used. That was sedition. That was an attempt to basically destroy America. That was treason. Those are appropriate phrases for use when there is a civil war. But it's not an appropriate use of words to describe protests that you disagree with, even violent protests. There are laws that cover that. And I have no problem with prosecuting people for trying to obstruct Congress, for engaging in violence, even for trespassing. It's a misdemeanor, but if people went into the House of Representatives or the Senate without authorization, knowing that they were trespassing, that's a misdemeanor. In the case of January 6th, there's video showing the police will welcome them in, saying, come in, you can stay for a while, just leave when we tell you to. And my client, of course, did just that. He left after just a few minutes and didn't do any damage. He's being prosecuted for very, very serious felonies, not just for trespassing. So we're seeing tremendous weaponization of the criminal justice system by one group of people, one political party, one ideology against people on the other side. And even though it's lost me friends and it's made me a lot of enemies, I'm going to continue to defend anybody who is oppressed by the government, anybody who is improperly charged with crimes like sedition. I don't have to like my clients any more than a doctor has to like his or her patients. It's my job to defend them, and it's my job to defend the Constitution. And I'm going to continue to do it both in the court of public opinion on this show, the Dershow, and I will continue to do it in courts of law if asked to do so. I'm 84 years old, and I'm not as active in courts of law as I used to be, but I'm still doing it, and I'm still arguing some appeals. And if the right trial comes along, I'll argue a trial. As you know, I do half of my cases pro bono. I just achieved a miraculous result, which I'm not allowed to discuss yet, but getting a person in one part of the world out of a terrible, life-threatening situation. And when a lawyer can save a life, I have my two grandkids are doctors, they save lives. They have the great privilege of saving lives. Lawyers can't often save lives, but this week I did. And I'm very happy to be able to do that. I wish I could do more of that. One of the greatest disappointments of my life was when I was unable to persuade President Trump in the last hours of his office to commute the sentence of somebody, a guilty person to be sure, but who had reformed himself from prison and was subject to being executed. I was not his lawyer. I was just making a compassionate plea, but President Trump told me that he had promised the family of the victims that he would allow the execution to go forward, and he did, and I was devastated. So if you have an opportunity to save a life, the Talmud says, he who saves even a single life, it's as if they saved the world. But of course, it's better if you can save many, many lives. And so I'm going to continue my fight against misuses of the criminal law. And I think my newest focus is now on the sedition laws. And just let's remember again that liberals and civil libertarians and people on the left were strong, and the ACLU was strongly opposed to the use of sedition laws to go after protesters on the left. I want to hear the ACLU get involved in this case. They don't like the Oath Keepers. They don't like this character, Stuart Rhodes, by the way, who went to Yale Law School. He's a fellow Yale Law School alum. In fact, a hard left lying a professor, did a little poll recently of who the most embarrassing Yale Law School graduates were. And Stuart Rhodes and I, along with Justice Alito, were on the top of the list. Alito for his opinions, Rhodes for being the founder of the Oath Keepers, and me for defending President Trump, something I'm very proud of, voting against him, but defending him. That's the way I handle my professional life. And hopefully I'll have a chance to vote against them again, because I don't approve of efforts by people on the left and people who are Democrats to stop him from running because they disagree with him. I don't believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution prohibits President Trump from running because he was involved in sedition under the 14th Amendment. No, that's not right. What he did was wrong, and people have the right to vote against him if he's wrong, but they have the right to vote for him too. And so I'm going to continue to fight for the marketplace of ideas, the marketplace of elections, the non-weaponization of the criminal law. It will continue to make me enemies on both sides. The people on the left don't like me because I defend people like Trump. The people on the right don't like me because I vote against people like Trump. But it's a complex world, and I try to live it in a nuanced way that is consistent with my principles. That's why I wrote a book called The Price of Principle, How Integrity is Worth the Consequences. And I paid consequences. Believe me, I paid consequences. My family has paid consequences. My wife particularly has paid consequences. But we all live by principle in my family, and we're very proud of it. And I hope that more people will live by principles, good principles, principles that have made America great over the years and will hopefully continue to make America great for many, many years to come. Okay, let's get some letters today. A lot of people didn't like the fact that I talked about the World Cup yesterday, the great defeat that America inflicted on Iran. President Biden today congratulated the American team for their great victory. Yes, I am a sports fan. I was a varsity basketball player in high school. I went to hundreds and hundreds of baseball games, Boston Red Sox, Brooklyn Dodgers, even New York Yankees. I went to years and years and years of the Boston Celtics. I love sports, and I love the World Cup. I'm not, a knowledgeable soccer fan the way I am a baseball fan. I really do know baseball. In fact, let me give you a riddle. You can write me answers to it. There is one situation in baseball where there can be 4 outs in an inning, actually 4 outs in the inning. And each of the 4 outs counts. And it's not dropping the ball on the 3rd strike and throwing them out. That's not an out. 4 actual outs. And the last out may make the difference between winning and losing the game. I put that question to the commissioner of baseball, Bud Selig, when I was with him at a Red Sox game, and I stumped him. And then I told him the answer. And I'll tell you the answer after you write to me and tell me whether you can come up with the answer. Those of you who don't like sports, forget about it. All right, here's the first letter about that. I clicked off in 10 seconds as he's talking about soccer. U.S. citizens do not care about soccer. Speak for yourself. It's one of the fastest growing sports, particularly among young people. You don't speak for U.S. citizens. Confession, I do like Ted Lasso on Apple TV. So do I. I like that show, but I like soccer. And I watched the game today. I watched Argentina win today. I'm looking forward to the United States playing in the knockout round. You don't like sports? Hey, we're a free country. don't watch it, but I'm going to continue to watch it. Another question about sports. Um, the Iran players are very brave. How many sports players in this country have that much courage? Look, I think athletes generally are very brave. And I saw a couple of scenes during the Iran-US game. I saw a scene where an American player who had knocked over an Iranian player helped pick him up and pat him on the back. The same thing was true with Iranian players. Once you're on the athletic field, I think often political differences tend to evaporate, and people appreciate good athleticism. Look, I was a big Red Sox fan, but every time Derek Jeter came up to bat, I stood up and gave him a standing ovation. Every time Mariano Rivera came in to pitch the ninth inning, even though I was hoping, that the Red Sox would hit off him, I would get up and give him a standing ovation. Great players should be recognized as great players, just like great politicians should be recognized as great politicians, even if they're of the opposite party. I happen to think that both George Bushes, who I voted against both times, 4 times, I guess, 3 times, 4 times, I voted against them. I think they really were great presidents and great human beings. I'm willing to admire people I voted against. I happen to think that Bill Clinton would be a better president, so I voted for Bill Clinton over George Bush the first. But I admire talent, and I admire talent when it's in sports or whether it's in politics. Okay. Then we get the typical stuff. Let me give you a couple more of them, not too much. I gave you enough of it yesterday. As much as I'm impressed with Mr. Dershowitz, he is a Zionist first loyalist and has agreed to destroy free speech for the sake of Zionist supremacist redefinition. What are you talking about? I am defending the free speech of everybody, including Zionists, when I complain about 14 clubs at the University of California at Berkeley banning all Zionist speakers, which means the vast majority of Americans. Remember, a Zionist is simply somebody who believes in Israel's right to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people, that the Jewish people have the same right to have a country as every other group of people, that surely Israel has as much right to exist as New Zealand. New Zealand was a colonialist enterprise. The people who moved into New Zealand, the white people, had no connection to New Zealand. They just colonized it and killed the Maori, created a treaty which they then violated. At about the same time that Israel was established. And the Jews, on the other hand, have this deep connection, biblical connection to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. So I'm a Zionist, but I'm not a supremacist. And why am I destroying free speech? When have I ever tried to suppress anybody's free speech? I've defended the right of anti-Zionists to speak. I defended the right of Palestinian students at Harvard to fly the flag of the Palestinian Authority when Yasser Arafat died. I also exercised my own free speech and criticized Yasser Arafat. I said his death was untimely. If he had only died 4 years earlier, there might have been a Palestinian state. So, I'm not going to suppress free speech. If you're an anti-Zionist, if you're an anti-Semite, go ahead, speak. I'll rebut it. I'll answer it in the court of public opinion, but I will not suppress your speech. Okay. Here's another nasty one, but I have to answer it. I wonder what the size of the check was that he wrote to Virginia Giuffre to get her to drop the case. Probably set him back a few million. Let me be very, very clear. Not a single penny was paid or would ever have been paid. No money changed hands. A decision was made by the other side to drop the lawsuit and by her to recognize that she may have misidentified me as someone with whom she had sex. That was something that happened, but no money was changed hands. But you probably don't believe that, just like you don't believe that I've ever had sex with an underage girl. You can believe what you want to believe. The evidence is there. The agreement is public. You can read it. You'll see. Not a single penny changed hands. But go ahead. Believe what you want to believe. This is a good one. We have videos of you, pedophile. I hope so. I waive my right to any videos you have of me, as I've said from the beginning, I hope there's a video of every moment of Jeffrey Epstein's life in all of his houses. I'm the one who asked to have all the videos made public. I don't want anything kept secret. Everything should be made public because I have absolutely nothing to hide. But if you have a view and you have a locked-in view, it doesn't matter what the facts are. It's just going to be the same. Evidence doesn't matter. We live in a fact-free society, unfortunately. We live in a society where evidence doesn't matter, and it's a tragedy. It's a terrible thing when you can present the most overwhelming evidence, but people have a predisposition. The predisposition is often based on race or religion or ideology or party affiliation, but it's a predisposition. And open-mindedness is no longer regarded as a virtue. It's a vice. Open-mindedness, that means you're willing to say that the other side is right. It was the great learned hand, one of the great judges in American history, who said that the essence of a democracy is skepticism. The essence of democracy is a willingness to change your views, a willingness to admit that maybe you're wrong and maybe you could learn something from somebody. It's interesting how my letters reflect different points of view on that. I would say about half of my letters just have closed minds. They know what the truth is and they're not interested in what they hear from me or from anybody else. But I do get letters frequently from people saying, I had this point of view and now I heard what you had to say and I've changed my point of view. And although I don't agree with you completely, you've made me think a little bit about that. That's what a teacher is supposed to do. When I taught for 50 years at Harvard, I never, ever tried to get students to change their ideology or their belief. I just gave them information. I gave them ways of thinking about things. And my hope was always that they would come to their own conclusions. A teacher's role, particularly at university, is not to teach the students what to think. It's to teach them how to think so they can come to their own conclusions. I used to tell my students about exams, by the way. Remember what exams used to be? There used to be exams and tests. Now the American Bar Association has said no more law school aptitude tests is required to get into law school. Imagine if they abolished all tests for being a surgeon or for being a pilot flying you through a storm. We want meritocracy. I guess people think lawyers aren't important enough to test, but not only are we abolishing the law school aptitude tests for admission to law school, but now we're abolishing tests in law school, grades in law school, and abolishing meritocracy and substituting for meritocracy identity politics. And so talent is relegated to the dustbin of history, but race and gender and political ideology, those are the things today that will get you into law school and will get you into other professions. It's just a matter of time before the bar exam is abolished, because people think that if you have exams and you have meritocracy, you're going to lose diversity. That's the most racist comment possible. What people who say that are really saying is that people of certain races can't compete even if the tests are fair. No, if the tests are unfair, make them fair. But don't relegate certain groups of people to a situation where you're saying that they can't pass these tests or they can't do well in competitive situations. The way that people who have nothing manage to crawl up to the top, the American dream is based on competition and is based on meritocracy. So you're not going to get me supporting the abolition of the law school aptitude test. You'll get me supporting its improvement, perhaps, and it's taking into account factors like poverty or lack of access to special courses or even race, but not abolishing them and not abolishing tests. And so, I'm going to keep fighting for the fight that the principles that I believe in, even though, again, I'm not making any friends by doing this, and I'm not making it easier for my family. And I guess maybe I'm just too old to change. But, These principles have worked well for America for the last almost quarter of a millennium, and I think they will continue to work better than the newfangled woke approach to lack of meritocracy and identity politics. So I'll stay in Israel a few more days and meet with a lot of the interesting people here, and see you next week.